I, 32, female Leona, stood by my father's grave, but I didn't feel like I was at my father's funeral. The air was cold, biting at my cheeks, but the chill I felt came from the people around me. My mother, Helen, stood beside my brother, Mark, her hand clutching his arm as if he were the only thing holding her up. They formed a tight, impenetrable unit. I stood a few feet away, an island in a sea of shared grief that didn't seem to include me. I had loved my father, Richard, more than anything, yet here I was, feeling like a stranger. The service had been a blur of platitudes. The priest spoke of a man I barely recognized, a man defined by the anecdotes Mark had clearly fed him. He talked about my father's love for sailing, a passion Mark had shared, but failed to mention his love for woodworking, the craft he had taught me in the quiet hours of our weekends together. He spoke of family trips I was never invited on, of inside jokes I never heard. With every word, the space between me and my family grew wider. I watched Mark. He was playing the part of the grieving son perfectly. He accepted condolences with a somber nod, his eyes misty. He held our mother. He was the pillar of the family. But when his eyes met mine over the top of our mother's head, I saw a flicker of something else. It was triumph. It was a cold, hard glint of satisfaction that made my stomach turn. I knew then that my feeling of being an outsider wasn't just in my head. It was by design. After the casket was lowered, people began to disperse. They moved in slow, murmuring groups toward the line of cars waiting to take us to the reception at my mother's house. I wanted to go to her, to offer some real comfort, but Mark was always there, steering her away, guiding her toward a cousin or an old friend. He was managing her grief, and by extension, managing me out of the picture entirely. I saw my Aunt Carol watching me. Her expression was one of pity, which was almost worse than the exclusion. She started to walk toward me, but Mark intercepted her, saying something with a sad smile that made her turn and walk away. He was controlling the entire narrative, the entire day. I finally found a moment when my mother was standing alone, staring at the empty space where the casket had been. I walked over to her. "Mom," I said softly. She jumped, startled. "Oh, Leona, I didn't see you there." "I'm sorry about all this," I said, the words feeling hollow and useless. "Mark has handled everything so well," she replied, her gaze drifting back to him. "I don't know what I would have done without him. He arranged the whole service. He even picked out the flowers your father would have loved." That was the moment. The flowers. They were lilies. My father was allergic to lilies. He hated them. It was a small detail, a tiny error in the grand performance of Mark's grief, but it was the first crack in the facade. My father had loved simple wildflowers, the kind we used to see on our walks in the woods. He wouldn't have wanted these opulent, scentless lilies. "He hated lilies, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. She frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Don't be difficult, Leona, not today. Mark said your father mentioned wanting them." He was lying. It was a deliberate, pointed lie. It was a way of rewriting our father, of erasing the parts of him that belonged to me. I felt a surge of cold anger. This wasn't just about flowers. This was about everything. I turned and walked toward my brother. He was talking to the funeral director, handing him a credit card. He looked so important, so in charge. I waited until the director had walked away. "Mark," I said. He turned to me, his face a mask of weary sorrow. "Leona, are you heading to the reception? Mom needs us." "Why lilies, Mark?" I asked. His mask didn't slip. "What are you talking about?" "The flowers," I said, my voice low. "Dad was allergic to lilies. He despised them. You know that." For the first time, a genuine emotion crossed his face. It wasn't sadness. It was irritation. "It's what Mom wanted," he said dismissively, turning to walk away. "No, it's not," I said, stepping in his path. "She just said you told her Dad wanted them. Why did you lie about something so small?" He stopped. He looked around to make sure no one was close enough to hear. The somber mask dropped completely, replaced by a contemptuous sneer. He leaned in close, his voice a low, vicious whisper. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't about flowers, you idiot, he hissed. This is about everything. I've been excluding you for years, from trips, from decisions, from his final days. You were not here when he died because I did not call you. You did not know how sick he was because I did not tell you. You are a guest at this funeral, not a daughter. Now you know. So get out of my way and go play the part of the distant, forgotten child. The words hit me like a physical blow. His arrogance was going to be his undoing. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The shock was turning into resolve. The will reading is tomorrow, isn't it? I asked, my voice devoid of any emotion. Yes, he said, a little less certain of himself. At Mr. Albright's office, 10 o'clock. Try to be on time for once. I just nodded slowly. I looked past him, toward my father's grave. I made a silent promise to him. This was not over. Mark had his day. I would have mine. I turned and walked away from my brother, not toward the reception, but toward my car. I had work to do. The drive home was silent. I couldn't believe I had believed his excuses. Had my father just let Mark push me out? I couldn't believe that. It didn't fit the man who taught me to measure twice, cut once. I got back to my apartment and pulled out a small, worn wooden box, one of the first things my father and I had made together. Inside were a few personal items and a stack of letters. In the one from my 25th birthday, I found a small, folded piece of paper. On it, in my father's neat, architectural handwriting, was a short message. Leona, if you ever feel like you're on the outside looking in, remember there's always more than one way to open a door. Your safety net is with the man who holds the keys to the kingdom. He'll know what this means. The man who holds the keys to the kingdom. Mr. Albright. The family lawyer. I called my friend, Sam. I told him everything. I need to find some proof of his exclusion before I walk into that office tomorrow. Something concrete. Okay, where do we start? Bank accounts? Property records? Sam asked. Let's start with something simple, I said. The lake house. Mark told me a few months ago that Dad sold it. Can you look into the property records? I'm going to try to talk to Aunt Carol. I called Aunt Carol. Do you remember the lake house? It's a shame Dad had to sell it. There was a long pause. Sell it? She said, her voice filled with confusion. Leona, what are you talking about? Your father didn't sell the lake house. We were just there with him in the spring. He loved that place. He would never have sold it. My blood ran cold. I had my first piece of concrete evidence. It was a lie. My phone buzzed. It was Sam. You were right, he said. I checked the county records for the lake property. It's still in your father's name. No sales, no transfers, nothing. So Mark has been paying the bills on a house he told me was sold, I murmured, the pieces clicking into place. There's more, Sam said, his voice tight. Your father transferred his majority shares in Thompson Development over to a newly formed holding company about 6 months ago. It's called MT Holdings LLC. The sole officer is listed as Mark Thompson. He hadn't just lied about a vacation home. He had stolen our father's life's work. He had moved the primary family asset into a company that he alone controlled. I knew I needed proof of his malicious intent. I decided to call my father's home care nurse, Maria. Maria, I said, after confirming my father was proud of my woodworking. My brother, Mark, he told me that Dad didn't want any visitors at the end, that he wanted to be left alone. Was that true? The silence stretched. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and firm. Leona, your father asked for you every single day. The world seemed to stop. All those times Mark had told me, he's resting, the doctor said no visitors, were lies. He had stolen our last moments together. Did you keep any records? A logbook of visitors or notes on my father's condition? Yes, she confirmed. I keep a detailed daily log for all my patients. I noted it almost every day for the last month. Richard asked for his daughter, Leona, again this morning. It's all in there. She told me that if the log was subpoenaed as part of an official estate inquiry, she would be legally obligated to provide it. I now had everything I needed: the lie about the lake house, the secret transfer of the business, and the nurse's testimony about my father asking for me. I needed to activate the safety net. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Albright's office 45 minutes early. "Sir, a few years ago, my father wrote me a note," I began. In it, he said that if I ever found myself in a difficult situation with the family, my safety net was with the man who holds the keys to the kingdom. He said you would know what it means. Mr. Albright's expression did not change, but I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Your father was a very prudent man, Leona," he said finally. "He believed in preparing for all contingencies. He established a set of conditions that, if met, would fundamentally alter the disposition of his estate. I had done my part. I had spoken the code words. I had activated the plan. Soon, Mark and my mother arrived. Mark was supremely confident. He looked at me with a pitying smile. Mr. Albright began to read the will. It was exactly as Mark had planned. My mother received the house and an annuity. Mark received the entire investment portfolio. Mr. Albright read, "Regarding my shares in Thompson Development, as those shares were transferred prior to my passing into the MT Holdings LLC, they are not part of this estate and are considered the sole property of the owner of that entity." Mark's smug smile widened. He had won. And finally, Mr. Albright read, "To my youngest daughter, Leona Thompson, I bequeath my workshop and all the tools and materials therein. I also bequeath her my love and my deepest apologies for not being a better father." Mark's smile turned into a sneer of triumph. My inheritance was a shed and an apology, but Mr. Albright did not close the folder. "That," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "concludes the primary text of the will." Mark's smile faltered. "Primary text? What does that mean?" "It means, Mr. Thompson, that your father was a man of foresight. There is a codicil, an amendment to the will, to be executed only if a very specific set of conditions were met." Mr. Albright's eyes were like chips of ice as he looked at Mark. "The codicil is conditional. Its activation depends entirely on the actions taken by others in the final weeks of your father's life." He read the first condition. "If, upon his death, it is found that his youngest daughter, Leona Thompson, was not consulted in the planning of his funeral arrangements, the codicil is to be activated." "Is that true, Leona?" Mr. Albright asked. "No, sir," I said, my voice clear. "I was not consulted. That is one condition met, but there is a second, more significant one. If, in the last month of his life, your father was prevented from seeing his daughter, Leona, or if Leona was deliberately kept from her father's side, then the codicil is to be executed in its entirety, and the primary will is rendered null and void." Mark jumped up, stammering a lie that I was too busy. "Your father instructed his home care nurse, a woman named Maria, to keep a meticulous daily log," the lawyer explained. "He specifically instructed her to note any time he asked for Leona. I took the liberty of subpoenaing that log this morning, based on a conversation I had prior to this meeting. This is a certified copy of the nurse's log for the last 30 days of your father's life. It notes that Richard asked for his daughter, Leona, 27 times. It also notes the excuses you gave the nurse." Mark stared at the papers, his face a ghastly gray. "Therefore," Mr. Albright declared, his voice booming, "both conditions for the activation of the codicil have been met. The primary will that I have just read is hereby declared void." He pulled out the second, slimmer envelope. The real will. "To my daughter, Leona Thompson, I bequeath my entire investment portfolio. I also name her the sole beneficiary of the Richard C. Thompson Trust, which contains the majority of my liquid assets. Mark made a choking sound. But there is more, Mr. Albright said, looking directly at Mark. The codicil further stipulates that the execution of this codicil automatically triggers a full forensic audit of all financial activities, transfers, and contracts undertaken by Mark Thompson under his power of attorney for the last 2 years. Any and all assets, funds, or properties found to have been improperly or fraudulently transferred out of the estate are to be returned immediately. If those assets cannot be returned, their full cash value is to be deducted from any remaining inheritance due to Mark. Mark broke. He was legally indebted to me for everything he stole. He turned his desperate eyes on me. Leona, please don't do this. We're siblings. Don't let him do this audit. I am not stopping the audit, I said, my voice firm. You wanted me to feel like a forgotten child. You are the one who has been truly and irrevocably excluded. The game is over, Mark. I stood up and left the room, leaving him in a defeated heap, and my mother staring at him with a dawning, terrible understanding. The safety net had been deployed. I had been given the chance to live my life without having to play his cruel game. The silence in the conference room was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Mark remained hunched over, his shoulders shaking. My mother was frozen, her gaze fixed on her eldest son, her golden child, now revealed as a common thief. She looked lost, as if the map of her world had been torn to shreds before her eyes. Mr. Albright began gathering his papers with a quiet finality. He slid the nurse's log and the activated codicil into a new folder, separate from the now-defunct primary will. I was the first to speak. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension. What happens now, Mr. Albright? He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. Now, Leona, we begin the process. I will file the codicil with the probate court this afternoon. I will also officially engage a forensic accounting firm to commence the audit of the estate as per your father's instructions. It will be a thorough process. An audit? My mother whispered, the word foreign and frightening to her. What does that mean for Mark? Mr. Albright adjusted his glasses, his gaze turning to my brother with professional detachment. It means that every transaction Mark made as power of attorney will be scrutinized. The transfer of the Thompson Development shares, any large withdrawals, any and all uses of your late father's funds. If irregularities are found, and I suspect they will be, the estate has the right to reclaim those assets. Legally, Mark will be required to repay everything he took. Mark looked up, his face pale and streaked with tears. It was not a look of remorse. It was a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Repay it? With what? The company is tied up in contracts. The money, it's been invested. That will be your problem to solve, Mark, Mr. Albright said coolly. You may need to liquidate your own assets. The debt is to the estate, which now belongs to your sister. So, ultimately, you will owe the money to Leona. The irony was so thick it was almost laughable. All his scheming to steal from me had resulted in him being massively in debt to me. Mark turned his desperate eyes on me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, pleading look. Leona, please don't do this. We're siblings. We can work something out. Don't let him do this audit. Work something out? I repeated, my voice flat. Is that what you were doing when you told a dying man his daughter was too busy to see him? Were you working something out, then? The question hung in the air, an unanswerable indictment. I didn't, he stammered, unable to form a coherent defense. I was trying to protect him. He was so frail. You were trying to protect yourself, I said, the anger finally seeping into my voice. You wanted him to die, thinking I didn't care. You wanted me to live with the guilt of that forever. You didn't just try to steal his money, you tried to steal his memory of me. You tried to steal my final moments with him. There is no working it out from that. My mother flinched at my words, the full scope of Mark's cruelty finally hitting her. She pulled her hand away from his arm as if he were suddenly contagious. I am not stopping the audit, I said, my decision firm and clear. I looked at Mr. Albright. Please proceed with everything as my father instructed. I want it all back. Every penny. Very well, Leona, the lawyer said with a decisive nod. Mark let out a sob and buried his face in his hands again. The fight had gone out of him completely. I stood up. I couldn't stand to be in that room for another second. I looked at my mother. I'm going home, I said. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Leona, wait. I can't, Mom, I said, my voice softer but no less firm. I have nothing more to say right now. I walked out of the conference room. The weight of being the family disappointment had lifted. It was never my weight to carry. The next day, I met with Mr. Albright again. He had already set the wheels in motion. The accounting firm starts on Monday, he told me. They will find everything. From what you told me about the lake house and the development company, we are likely looking at a substantial sum. Good, I said. I don't want to be punitive. I just want what was taken. Mr. Albright leaned back in his chair. Leona, your father would be very proud of you. He saw Mark's ambition, and he saw your quiet nature, and he worried that Mark would take advantage of you. He created this codicil as a last resort. He wrote a letter for you, to be given to you if the codicil was ever activated. He reached into his desk and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was my father's handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. Your father was a wise man, Albright said. He knew that money and property were one thing, but character was another. He structured this whole thing as a test of character, a test that Mark has failed spectacularly. I spent the rest of the day in my father's workshop. I opened the letter. My dearest Leona, it began, if you are reading this, it means my greatest fears have come to pass. It means Mark has let his ambition get the better of his love for his family. I am so sorry. I am sorry for not being strong enough to stop him myself. I am sorry for the pain he has undoubtedly caused you. I tried to treat you both equally, but you were always different. Mark needed the world to see him. You just needed to see the world. He chased applause. You chased purpose. I fear I encouraged his ambition too much and did not protect your spirit enough. This safety net I have created is not about punishment. It is about balance. It is to restore what was taken and to give you the foundation you deserve, the one I should have ensured for you while I was alive. The company, the investments, they are just tools, like the chisels on this bench. What you build with them is up to you. Build a good life, daughter. Be happy. That is the only inheritance that truly matters. I love you. Dad. Tears streamed down my face. It was absolution. It was the conversation I had longed to have with him for years. A few days later, Mark called. His voice was thin, reedy, stripped of all its former confidence. Leona, he stammered. The accountants called me. They're going to ruin me. I'll lose everything. You mean you'll lose everything you stole, I corrected him. It wasn't like that. It was just business. I was making the assets grow for the family. For you, Mark, I said calmly. You were doing it for you, and you were so sure you'd get away with it that you couldn't resist rubbing my face in it at our father's funeral. That was your mistake. You told on yourself. Please, Leona, he begged. Call it off. We can make a deal. I'll give you half of the company. No, Mark, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. There will be no deal. The audit will proceed. You will pay back every single dollar that you owe the estate, and you and I will not be running anything together. We will not be doing anything together ever again. But we're siblings, he whispered. You have a strange way of showing it, I said. This conversation is over. Don't call me again. From now on, you can communicate with me through Mr. Albright's office, just like any other debtor. I hung up the phone. The next call was from my mother. Her voice was hesitant, fragile. Leona, can we talk? She asked. I'm listening, I said, my guard still up. I am so sorry, she began genuinely. I was blind. I let Mark tell me what to think, what to feel. I saw how he treated you, but it was easier to believe his version of things. It was easier to believe you were distant than to believe he was cruel. I failed you, Leona. I failed you as a mother. Why, Mom? I asked. Why was it always him? Why did you always choose him? Because he needed it more, she said softly, and it was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. He was always so hungry for approval, for attention. You were always so self-contained. You had your own world, your own passions. You seemed like you didn't need me as much. He was loud, and your father was quiet, and I listened to the loudest voice in the room. It was a terrible mistake, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I'm willing to try, I said slowly. But it has to be different. There can be no more secrets, no more enabling. You have to see him for who he is, not who you wish he was. And you have to see me for who I am, too. I will, she promised. I will try, Leona. I promise. The audit took months. Mark had siphoned off nearly $2 million. He was forced to sell his luxury apartment and liquidate his personal portfolio. He had to sign over the MT Holdings LLC, and with it, what was left of Thompson Development, to me, as part of his repayment. He was left with almost nothing. He moved into a small, rented apartment on the other side of the state. I took the helm of Thompson Development. I rebranded the company, focusing on high-quality, sustainable residential construction, incorporating my passion for woodworking into the designs. The business thrived. I also took care of my mother. We began to build a new relationship based on honesty. A year after the funeral, I drove out to the lake house. As I walked down to the dock, I felt a sense of peace. The weight of the past was gone. A few days later, Aunt Carol called. Listen, there's something I think you should know about Mark. This wasn't the first time he's done something like this. She told me about the trust my grandfather had left and how Mark had invested both our shares and lost them, and how my father quietly replaced my $20,000, never telling me to keep the peace. The codicil wasn't a sudden reaction. It was the culmination of a lifetime of observation. My weekly dinners with my mother continued. One evening, she showed me a photo album. Mark told me Dad was embarrassed, I said quietly, referencing my career choice. My mother closed her eyes in pain. The lies were just constant. He was jealous of you, Leona. He was jealous of your talent. He was jealous of the quiet bond you had with your father. Everything he did, all the noise he made, it was all to drown that out. The forensic audit concluded. The final report showed a substantial shortfall in Mark's repayment. He's working as a sales associate at a car dealership, Mr. Albright said. It will take him the rest of his life to pay this back. The grim justice was clear. About 2 years after the will reading, I received a letter. It was from Mark. Leona, it began. I don't expect you to read this, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. I have thought about Dad. I have thought about what I did. I was doing it for me. I wanted to win. I saw everything as a competition with you. It was a sickness. I am sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I destroyed our family for nothing. I am sorry I kept you from Dad at the end. That is the thing I will have to live with forever. It is a heavier debt than the money. I don't expect a reply. I just needed to say it. Mark. I read the letter 3 times. It was the first honest thing he had ever said to me. I didn't reply, but the letter released the last bit of anger I was holding on to. A few weeks later, I was at the lake house with my friend Sam. You seem different, Leona, he said. Lighter. I think I am, I said. I got a letter from Mark. The hold he had on me is gone. The sun dipped below the horizon. I thought about my father's letter. Build a good life. I was. It was a life built on a foundation of truth, a foundation my father had ensured I would have. Mark had been excluded from this peaceful life by his own hand. The game was over. I hadn't won. I'd just been given the chance to live my life without having to play. And that was the greatest inheritance of all.